Welcome back, everyone. Uh, just kind of wanted to do a first impressions video on this SDS 1911A1. I picked this up because I've heard such good things about it, and also being in a military configuration, it's one of my favorite firearms. That style of firearm, that 1911 and 1911A1 from World War I and World War II. And this, of course, mimics the 1911A1. I say mimics because it's definitely a clone. And we'll bring out an authentic 1943 built or 1911A1 also to kind of show how good it is and what's lacking and what I found. I've already cleaned the firearm. I took it completely apart to clean it, and I've got one little problem with it I'll discuss here in a minute. But what they got right on it is the look of it. Of course, the function is pretty good too. From what I can tell so far, I have yet to get it to the range. But in dimensions, of course, 1911 is pretty universal, and this one enhances that a little bit further by making it a World War II version. Very, very identical. A few little differences, and we'll zoom in on those in just a minute. But first of all, what are my out of the box impressions? Very good. The firearm has been cleared. We'll go ahead and pop the magazine out, which incidentally is a Mekar magazine, and it's actually quite a bit lighter in feel, and it's not quite the same in look as an original. In fact, we will pull the original out too. This is a General Shaver magazine, one of the more expensive ones that you can get these days. There are other ones that are more expensive, rarer. You can see it's a typical Colt style magazine. You can see that offset seam that's typical of the General Shaver magazines. See, that's quite a bit different. Tapered feed lips, parallel on the modern ones. Modern ones always have World War II and will generally always have the tapered feed lips, as you can see, and they're parallel here. And you can see this is a blued magazine actually. This one is Parkerized. The firearm itself is Parkerized, and it's a fairly close match to the original, the one that I have anyway. A little bit greener in color, perhaps, or greenish gray in color, but not bad. But right off the bat, I took it apart and cleaned it. Wanted to get the manufacturing oils out of it, as I usually do. Took it down 100% to a bare frame, cleaned it out. It also has a little bit of a hitch in the trigger. Trigger's not bad, except for that. In fact, the whole function of the gun is not bad, except for that. And what that is the trigger is almost like a 3-stage trigger instead of the typical 2-stage trigger. This one has an extra. As we pull the trigger, it's not going to do anything until we cock it and show that it is empty. But as I push the trigger, it goes until it hits a wall. And then once you pass that wall, it hits a second wall right there. I don't know if you saw that little bit of movement in there. Of course, it's a real subtle wall. There's probably some roughness on the disconnector, possibly, or the spring, or maybe in the channel. But I'm going to go through all that. I've got all the stones and the fixtures in order to do trigger jobs on 1911s. This one is coming in at just a hair over 5 pounds, which is also a little bit heavy, and that's probably an indicator of something that is wrong inside with just some roughness or some machining work that might need to be looked at a little bit closer, which I didn't do the first time around. But the internals on this gun are really well done. No machine marks, and some of the main components are polished very well. Take a little bit closer look at some of the features on the gun. The typical plastic grips, and that mirrors the World War II version that I have also. The lanyard loop, the arch mainspring housing, the typical shortened trigger and shortened hammer spur of the, and a little bit longer on the beaver tail there for the A1 version as opposed to the 1911. Thicker front sight. The 1911 version has a thinner sight. The notched finger grooves and the short, as I said, shortened trigger with a checkering on it. This checkering on this one is very subtle. Of course, no front serrations or anything like that. So, very impressed with the build quality and the feel. And the trigger's a little bit heavy, but I'm sure that would probably disappear with break-in. But we're going to go ahead and I'm going to perform a little bit of a trigger job on it. We're not going to get too extreme with it, and smooth it out. Check the angles on it. Make sure we don't have excessive amount of positive angle on it, causing that creep in it, that severe creep, that wall of creep I have in it. But other than that, nice reproduction. SDS Knoxville, Tennessee is the importer, and it's made in Turkey. You can see Tisash, Turkey, but that's how we're taught to pronounce that. So let's bring up the original 1911. Right off the bat, you can see the grips are a shade darker. This one has a checkered back strap, whereas this one has the serrated back strap. Both are correct. You would find them both ways. You can see how similar they are, though. Of course, the roll marks are going to be different. We have the model 1911A1 U.S. Army there, whereas on this one you see the Colt logo. And then, of course, the original has the U.S. property and U.S. their model number, U.S. Army. So one of the major differences is the ejection port. They were unmodified on the original, and this one, as you can see, is a lowered ejection port. So very subtle. That enhances reliability, though. So for a shooter, not a bad thing. The only other little thing I've noticed there, you can see there's a little groove under the lanyard on the original, and that's missing on this one. Very subtle thing that's not going to hurt its appearance or functionality at all. The magazine, the original magazine, yep, it'll slip right in. I'm depressing the button to save wear and tear on that old magazine. As you can see, it works, locks it back just fine, functions perfectly fine with the original magazine. Very crisp, positive safety. So all in all, quite the bargain. If you want the feel, or just want a nice a World War II firearm, or just want a nice 1911 to shoot, this is a really good bet for you. Now the sights are not the greatest, but they mimic the original sights very well. So no complaints at all. I'm going to get that out of the way because we're going to do a video on that earlier or later. The next thing I would like to point out though is the mainspring housing. There was a small problem in disassembly when I did disassembly of this firearm. If you're familiar with 1911s, the mainspring is right inside of a hole in the mainspring housing. You pull this pin out, it has a groove in it, and this actually has a hole in the bottom that a small pointed plunger engages with this pin. That's what holds this pin in place. This one was tight enough that it wouldn't have ever gone anywhere, but that hole was undercut on this, and that pin was not protruding at all into this, or that plunger was not protruding at all in order to maintain pressure on that pin. So I had to enlarge that, massage that hole just a little bit so that that pin would protrude, or that plunger would protrude down and hold the pin in place. So that kind of a thing that slipped by him on this one. I don't know if others are that way, and I don't know if you'd ever present a problem as tight as the pin fits. It's a very snug friction fit anyway. So, as I said, just a touch over 5 pounds. We're going to try and get that trigger weight down between 4 and 4.5 pounds. Like the original is, it's running right at 4.5 pounds trigger pull on the original. Of course, who knows how many miles and how many rounds have been through the original, and we have 0 on this one so far. Just comes in a cardboard box and with a cleaning brush and rod and an instruction manual. That's all you get with it. One magazine. But at that price point, I think you can go firing another either original Colt or another Metgar magazine if you desire, at a very reasonable price. A local store here carries them in the neighborhood of $10-15 for an aftermarket magazine that will function just fine in it. So there we have it. Just a quick first look at the SDS from Knoxville, Tennessee, made in Turkey. What a good bargain this is, I believe. I wouldn't hesitate to get another one in spite of the little glitches I'm having with mine. You know, I always have glitches, it seems like, just the nature of my luck. So go out and buy yourself one if you want to have some fun with the military 1911. So stay tuned and we'll get at that other 1911 out and take a closer look at it. Thanks for watching.